Okay, as promised, here is your video for topic 2.15 on the Haitian Revolution. We'll especially be looking at the historical and cultural significance of the Haitian Revolution, the only slave uprising to result in the overthrow of a European colonial power and the full emancipation of formerly enslaved people. Our story starts in 1783, shortly after the United States won independence from Great Britain. This victory benefited white landowners, but didn't do anything for enslaved African Americans, whose legal status as chattel was maintained by the Constitution. Spanish Florida was still offering asylum to anyone who professed allegiance to the Catholic Church, so a lot of black Americans hoped to flee to St. Augustine. At that time, the western boundary of the U.S. was the Mississippi River, and beyond that was a vast wilderness known as the Louisiana Territory, which had been claimed by the French. Much of this territory was unexplored, but it did include a city of strategic importance in New Orleans, which sits at the mouth of the Mississippi River. Whoever controlled New Orleans controlled access to trade up and down the Mississippi, and in 1783, that was the French. And the French had colonized more than just Louisiana. The French colonial empire included several Caribbean islands, such as Guadeloupe and Martinique, as well as a sizable tract of land in South America called French Guiana. French Guiana is actually still a French colony even today. But France's most important colony in the Caribbean was called Saint Domingue, which sits on the western side of the island of Hispaniola. The eastern side of that island was a Spanish colony called Santo Domingo. These two names both refer to the same person, Saint Dominic, but one is French and the other Spanish. Both colonies also produced a large amount of sugar, which was the main cash crop in the Caribbean, and this made Saint Domingue the most profitable and lucrative colony of the French colonial empire. Maintaining control of all these overseas colonies required a lot of organization, but back in France, the 1780s were becoming quite chaotic. Centuries of rule by ultra fancy aristocrats had led to unrest among the large and increasingly impoverished peasant class. And in 1789, the French peasants rose up in revolution. They built a machine called the guillotine, which was very efficient in separating the French nobility's heads from their bodies. And by the time the whole thing was over, France was no longer a monarchy, but a republic, governed by a larger group of rather silly looking men. In the midst of all the chaos and decapitation in France, the enslaved people of Saint Domingue seized the opportunity to start a revolution of their own. In 1791, a major rebellion broke out, and with the French government in disarray, it quickly got out of control, growing into a full scale war involving up to 100,000 enslaved freedom fighters. French colonial forces tried to put down the rebellion, but they were unsuccessful, and the resistance continued to grow. Over the course of the next 13 years, France would gradually lose its grip on the colony. Just 3 years into the rebellion, the status of enslaved people in France's American colonies was legally changed. France's new revolutionary government had declared that slavery should be abolished throughout the French Empire. However, the authority of the revolutionary government only lasted until 1799, when an aggressive little man named Napoleon rose through the ranks of the French military and then declared himself emperor. Napoleon had dreams of conquering Europe and the world, and he wasn't so sure if he wanted to free all of the slaves in the empire. By 1801, 2 years into Napoleon's reign, the rebels in Saint Domingue were clearly winning, thanks to the military leadership of a brilliant commander named Toussaint Louverture. Both French and Spanish forces had been mostly subdued, and the rebels had come to control the entire island of Hispaniola by the end of that year. By 1802, Napoleon was ready to try to put down the rebellion and sent his generals to Saint Domingue to do battle with Louverture, who mounted a heroic defense and fought the French to a standstill, valiantly defending the island and his people. Louverture is rightly remembered as the greatest general of the conflict, and without his military leadership, it is unlikely that the rebels of Saint Domingue would have prevailed. He declared himself emperor of the entire island of Hispaniola, which really ticked off Napoleon, who finally managed to have him arrested. Louverture died in a French prison the following year, but his people continued to resist. And in 1803, Napoleon was feeling financially strained by the cost of fighting the war in Saint Domingue. and increasingly annoyed at the high maintenance nature of keeping France's American colonies under control. At this point, the Americans saw an opportunity, and President Thomas Jefferson offered to buy the French city of New Orleans for $10 million. Napoleon asked for $15 million and offered to throw in the entire Louisiana territory, as he was eager to turn his attention to Europe. Jefferson was pleased, and the U.S. had secured the most significant land purchase in its history, doubling the size of the country overnight. Newly acquired lands west of the Mississippi River opened the possibility of more cotton cultivation, which was rapidly becoming the nation's most lucrative cash crop. And this was a key factor in the cotton boom, which increased the demand for American slave labor and worsened the plight of enslaved African Americans. Meanwhile, things continued to go the rebels' way in Saint Domingue, and by 1804, Napoleon had withdrawn most of his forces from the colony. The black rebels finished off the rest and declared themselves an independent nation, which they named Haiti, honoring the indigenous Native American word for the island used by the Arawak people who originally inhabited it. Only the second American colony to achieve independence from Europe, the newly freed Haitians wrote a constitution to govern themselves and promptly abolished all forms of slavery. The Haitian Revolution had a broad impact on the political economy of the Americas. The French colonial empire had been gutted, and the markets for sugar production shifted elsewhere to Brazil, Cuba, and the United States. White planters and enslavers who were able to flee the island settled in the United States, bringing their slaves with them. And word of the revolution quickly spread among both black and white Americans. Inspired by the story of black freedom and sovereignty in Haiti, enslaved African Americans initiated a series of revolts against their enslavers in the U.S., with limited success. White Americans became ever more fearful of black resistance and revolt, and the United States government passed more restrictive measures to keep the enslaved population under control. But the Haitian Revolution had forever changed the political calculus in the Americas. The possibility of freedom and sovereignty seemed real and closer than ever, and this would become an important component of Black political thought.